What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. We're getting into some more general managers, and this is an organization I'm highly intrigued with, right? I think anytime you look to an organization that has been dominant at the top, right? I remember hearing Sean McCoy when he was still on the facility. He was mentioning that, when people are doing their predictions about Super Bowl contenders and stuff like that, realistically, you already have one team locked in stone throughout most decades, right? It's the Chiefs now. It's been the Patriots for the better part, it feels like, of the last 20 years. And so keeping that in mind is interesting to me. There's a little bit of buyers beware here when we talk about Chiefs assistant general manager Mike Borgonzi here. For that whole entire organizational structure, they've had very few candidates that have gone on to head coach and general manager roles, or even just top tier front office roles so far. Ryan Poles is the GM for the Bears, and he's the only name that I can think of off the top of my head recently that's been able to break out and find himself in a favorable position for himself. But just something to keep in mind. For some reason, for as successful as this Chiefs organization has been, the wins, the accolades, the Super Bowls, the top tier players, and you can make the argument, not Travis Kelce, but Patrick Mahomes being the face of the league. All of these guys they've been able to acquire and develop, and honestly, it's been a very sound and functional environment, right? I'm not tapped into the Chiefs because I'm not a fan like that, but I haven't necessarily heard of any huge contracts, crazy battles or guys demanding to be traded and such. So it's kind of a breath of fresh air, but something to keep in mind in that Borgonzi has already attempted to try to find roles before. The Commanders, when they scrapped their entire organization and it was sold and they got picked up, they interviewed him and he didn't end up getting the job. They went elsewhere. But why hasn't he gotten the job, right? People seem so far, the what I'm gathering is that people are putting him in the same bucket that and I can't even think of the coach anymore. Eric Bieniemy. It feels like he's in that same bucket as him, as a guy that's not getting his due just credit for what he's been able to help this Chiefs team build. And it looks like, from other examples that you see of the few guys that did break out elsewhere, that you have to go to another organization and have some measure of success to be able to finally not have to take a lateral move, but get to the next position that you're looking at. But regardless, let's start getting into some of his background and, why we're talking about him right now, right? One thing that I thought when we first dived into Ray Agnew that was going to be a bit of a rarity is front office guys that were former players. I thought a lot of these were like Ivy League, Harvard type guys or something that just so happened to love the NFL, broke in, worked themselves up, made connections, etc., etc. But he's a former fullback for Brown University. And then another common theme for a lot of these guys we covered, Ray Agnew, Matt Berry from the Seahawks, is that these guys have really groomed themselves with one organization. And so the three guys that we have covered all have different levels of success, right? With the Detroit Lions being an organization that was down bad for a long time. The Seahawks are anywhere from average to what feels like that small section of being a dominant contender with the Legion of Boom and stuff, and then just above average, right? Like a perennial 9-7 type team seems to be like the normal expectations. And then you have the Chiefs, the dynasty of our current decade. It looks like it could be going on for the next decade again. Definitely a Tom Brady, Bill Belichick type situation here for as long as Reed decides he wants to continue coaching. Now, when we take a look at how he's gone up through the ranks here, keep in mind he's been under the tutelage of technically three different GMs. Scott Pioli, John Dorsey, and Brett Veach, who also was his co-director of player personnel, and interestingly enough, they decided to go with Brett Veach when it came to getting a promotion instead of Borgonzi here. So also another tip in the feather cap to keep in mind. But a lot of that really doesn't perturb me from wanting him to get a serious look. And for what it's worth, there's a lot of rumors and sources out there that he's the top option, or one of at least the early top options for the New York Jets on their GM search. And so I'm really stoked about the idea of it. But he's made it from the bottom, right? When we get into his roles here, one of the things you'll pick up on is that any critical function of being a GM, he's been able to pull off. The financial piece of it, dealing with contracts, working things out with the agents, getting being smart about the guys that they extend early to get ahead of some of these booms in markets like QB, wide receiver, edge rusher, etc. Scouting college talent, working through pro NFL free agency, undrafted free agent classes that he's putting together, evaluating opponents, and being able to provide that to the coaching staff for their insights. I love it. This is probably the most well-groomed GM that we've talked about so far from an experience standpoint, and then being able to speak to how he can improve every single function for what may not be working right within this organization. So if you add him on top of getting a credible president of football operations, if he either deems it necessary or we end up getting that person before we even decide on the GM, this easily can turn into a situation where now you say, okay, a head coach can start looking at this and saying this is essentially a completely clean canvas. Let's roll, right? So he's worked himself in as a tight end coach at Amherst College. So even has some experience being able to look at the coaching, player personnel, and what it looks like to develop some of these guys. He was an assistant recruiting coordinator for Boston College, and then he ended up diving into the Chiefs atmosphere, where looks like he started out as a college scouting administrator. He assisted with pro and college evaluations, and then essentially did coordination activities for the college department, right? When it comes to, I'm sure, doing things like Combine, Senior Bowl, being able to figure out which main bowl games that they want to go to, if not all, and which resources will best be suited for which games, right? Then he gets promoted to manager of football operations. He was, again, worked on team logistics, budget planning as well, and then the general day-to-day operations. Pro personnel scout, where he evaluated pro players, did free agent recommendations, went through free agent workouts, college evaluations still, and then advanced scouting reports on his opponents. Promoted to assistant director of pro scouting after that, and then promoted to director of player personnel. But before that, that's where you kind of have that bit of a branch where he was first the co-director of player personnel with Brett Veach, then gets promoted to director of football operations. And so if you want to see him in a role like that, as opposed to an assistant GM, that's another way to work him in. And then he dives into his current role as assistant general manager, where he's tasked with supervising and directing the club's college and professional scouting operations, roster management, and player acquisition through the NFL draft, NFL free agency, street free agency, waiver claims, and then, of course, trades in all aspects. Draft trades during the regular season, player demanded trades, etc. So keeping all of that in mind, again, one of the most well-rounded guys that we have here. 16 years plus with the Chiefs, going on his fourth year as the assistant GM. He's had the pleasure of enjoying over his tenure with the Chiefs 8 division titles, and this is just recent memory, right? 6 AFC championships, 3 Super Bowls. Keep in mind, they hosted 5 of those AFC championship games. There's a lot of things that he was directly involved in that a lot of people should look at and consider it a stroke of brilliance, right? The record contract negotiations that occurred with guys like Patrick Mahomes or Chris Jones, who was holding out for a while there, right? Being able to build around a young quarterback when they first decided to make the trade up to get Patrick Mahomes. Again, I refer anybody to look back at even the player comments about Patrick Mahomes in year one, and things could have went completely off the rail here as a guy that was completely raw, but took to the coaching, developed extremely quickly, and he's the monster that we now see him as. But that took a lot of vision. It took really a lot of opportunity and luck that also went into it, but just having the intuition for which guys he wanted to target and then being able to craft a very, very strong team around him. And let's not forget, one of the best things about the contract for Patrick Mahomes, which at the time looked crazy, right? $500 million. I think he had like $295 million guaranteed, and that might be a lowball number off the top of my head. But not only did they get ahead of the crazy quarterback market that was going to explode, where guys were immediately making more guaranteed money than he was on an annual basis right after, but it allowed Patrick Mahomes to be properly compensated for achieving Super Bowls so early and being a dominant force. But it also did wonders for their cap space, where they were able to still add tons of pieces around him where necessary to fill in the gaps, so that the playoff window was never one that was going to shut and then get reopened. They planned on having it for that entire 10-year duration of his contract, which is beautiful. A late selection master. One of the things that everybody that I've been able to look into with any kind of commentary about him has said is that not only does he make excellent moves when it comes to day 3 picks, when it comes to being able to look at undrafted free agents and just build a practice squad that at least has a ton of promise on there, if not some contributors when necessary due to injury or otherwise. But this is a guy that completely understands building through the draft, and that can't be understated, right? One of the things that I feared most with us moving on from Joe Douglas was that we get just another cap guy or somebody that's good at building a war chest but doesn't know how to use it. Borgonzi and the successful class after class after class after class that he's been able to piece together, where, and let's talk about this for a minute, a lot of some of their best names are round 3 prospects or lower, right? And even then, they have a ton more guys as well that also are just solid contributors throughout the roster. But for the name recognition of some of the guys that maybe most of us will be accustomed to, he's been directly credited with drafting some of these guys that may have been overlooked within the organization, and he put his foot down. Was right tackle Louis Niang, slot cornerback or nickel cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, safety Juan Thornhill, running back Kareem Hunt, Chris Jones, the DT, Tyreek Hill, wide receiver, tight end Travis Kelce, and of course Justin Houston at edge / linebacker for them. So that's just a recent small list of names that he's been able to piece together, right? One of the things that I also love is that, whether intentional, and I think everybody has the intention of doing this, it just doesn't always work out the way. So you definitely have to be intentional, I guess, for lack of a better word. There has to be a direct, aggressive path in trying to build an offensive line. And he's been able to capitalize not only on some huge players falling down boards or maybe dropping further than expected for unknown reasons or whatever, or just having the insight to pick some of these guys up. But two of the ones I always look at, because I was hoping that we at least picked up the former, Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. He made the rest of the league look foolish with both of those guys. I think Creed Humphrey was either a second round pick, if I'm remembering, or 5th round, something like that. Maybe late 1st. But Trey Smith, I believe, was a 5th or 6th rounder for him. Center and guard. Cornerstones, right? You take a look at him also having the huge trade for the Ravens left tackle. What's the name that I'm thinking of here? I want to say Broderick Jones so bad, and that's not it. The name's right there, and I remember this vividly enough, at least from like the describing the guy, because I wanted to trade for him in Madden to start off my offensive line so many times, and I couldn't even get it done with multiple first-round picks. What was the name? Doesn't matter all that much. Or Orlando Smith? I'm somewhere in the vicinity. You guys got me. Either way, though, one of the things that I want to leave you guys with is, for anybody that does have some doubts, right? Two things. One, I remember there being some commentary from Peter Schrager, and he referenced Borgonzi as the Chiefs' secret weapon for a guy that just gets the job done, isn't necessarily vocal or put out there in the limelight all the time, but even considering a ton of guys that aren't moving from around the roster, and a lot of people that want to credit Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid as being the direct source of success, everybody, time after time after time after time, will tell you this is a team. It's a team sport for a reason, right? So not only do you have to get the 22 players on the field, just the starting units, to be able to go out there and cohesively play together, you also have to be able to build out the rest of the 53 for depth, for guys that you expect to be able to play in key roles or play up to a starting caliber level. You also have to be able to go out there and evaluate talent properly. You have to make sure you're not letting negative influences, into the roster. You have to make sure that the guys in the front office all know exactly what the role is, how they want to evaluate players, how they expect to be able to attack things that are going on, like the transfer portal or the COVID eligibility rules that are giving guys, an extra fifth, sixth, seventh season, it feels like, in many cases. And Borgonzi has been just one of those cornerstones, right? He's an anchor in this Chiefs organization for a reason. And then one of the other things, I know recency bias has to be at the forefront of a lot of our minds because the NFL is just a what have you done for me now league. But even before Patrick Mahomes, took the league by storm, let's not forget that the Chiefs just weren't some washed out team. They were still out there being able to get to the playoffs, making divisional round playoff appearances, putting up double digit seasons. So, and Borgonzi was a part of that then too. So, I look at over the longevity, right, the entirety of his career arc with the Chiefs, he has been on a steady upclimb, right? If you're looking at Borgonzi as a stock, he's up there, right? He's taken off, and he's had a boom like Patrick Mahomes, right? He's had a boom with guys like Kareem Hunt and Chris Jones and all these guys that he's been able to draft. But steady and slow wins the race, and he's been able to get it done. So I'm looking forward to it. I do want to see what feedback you guys have. What concerns would you raise the most about picking up a guy like Borgonzi? But to be honest, the red flags, if there really are any here, I'm not buying into them. I think this is a guy that can set the record straight, and hopefully when you're picking from a winning organization like this, one of the things that I would expect is walking in, you generally should do your research, right? So if you're looking at the Jets, you say, okay, I have a team that has been, on the front pages of news more often than not due to hype or due to drama. It's been a circus show. We have GMs that couldn't draft properly. We had GMs handing out ridiculous contract to guys that were clearly past their most talented days, and you had guys that just completely looked like they had no idea what they were doing when it came to coaching hires. Then I also have on top of all of that a overbearing owner, and one that may restrict decisions and jobs I can do. I need to walk in there and let him know if I don't have free reign of how I'm trying to build this thing, no deal, right? So I don't want us to continue to fall back into the same cycle that we're seeing with a lot of these guys where things look good maybe in the first year or two. We see some very promising trades or acquisitions or a draft class that comes through, and then there's burnout because we didn't hire the right coaching staff. And then you start seeing Woody Johnson slowly stripping away decisions from these guys. We need an alpha mentality and alpha personality in the GM chair, and I'm hoping this is the guy that can get that done. But Once again, let me know what you guys think. I'll catch you again. Peace.